How's it going, everybody? My name is Austin. I'm with Apostles Attic, and I'm with my friend Ryan.
Hello, my name is Ryan, and you can find my personal stuff over at aiiw.org. I'm glad you could join us today for some faithful dialogues.
All right, and today we are going to be continuing with our story that we were doing in Genesis about 2 episodes ago. And we were going to go through the whole Bible and basically explain how the entire Bible speaks about Jesus. And in the Gospel of John, Jesus was saying to the religious leaders, "You search the scriptures because you think in them you have eternal life. It is them that bear witness about me." And again in John, for you believed Moses, if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. So basically, which would be the Pentateuch, right? So we can start with the first 5 books and just keep going from there. And the last place we left off was the flood,
Okay,
and
let me
basically,
pull that up here so we can see that on the web page. All right, so we're here and we are seeing that God's promise to Noah. Oh, that blocks you out. Sorry, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I have two screens, but when I cover one, it messes up the Discord video, and so. All right,
you're all good.
we have it pulled up, and it's God's promise to Noah in chapter 9. What did you want to say about that?
I guess we'll just recap. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply." And this is post flood, right? And
Mm-hmm.
fill the earth, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, and on every bird of the air, and all that move on the earth, and all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man, from the hand of every man's brother, I will require the life of a man. Really quick, can you explain that last part for me?
Verse 5.
Yeah. Like,
Uh,
go up really quick for me.
mm-hmm.
So basically, when it said, "Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning," is that kind of okay? So, but you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its lifeblood, and that's like a separate thought from verse 5, right? And then it's continuing in a different thought. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. Is this saying like if somebody kills you, I demand their blood? Is like is that what's going on there?
So it's saying that in verse 4, um, and you have a lot of like static coming through, just so you know. I don't know if there's a way you can fix that. But what it says is, "But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood." So it's saying that there is something special about blood, and that it's so special that the meat that you eat won't have blood in it. So that you're supposed to drain all the blood out of the meat that you're going to eat. And you'll see that show up in Jewish practices later on when they're given the law by Moses later on in Exodus. You'll see that the standards that they have mean that you cannot, eat meat with its blood in it. Um, and then because there is something special about all blood, surely for a human's blood, which is even more special, I will demand a reckoning. So if human blood gets shed, there will be something that happens because of that. God is going to demand a price for someone who intentionally spills that blood. Is essentially what this is saying. Um, and then it says, "From the hand of every beast I will require it." Okay, and from the hand of man, from the hand of every man's brother, I will require the life of man. And it's saying, remember back in chapter, what is that, 3 or 4, when Cain and Abel, and God shows up and says, "So Cain, where's your brother Abel?" And Cain replies, "Well, who am I? Am I my brother's keeper?" This verse is saying, yes, you're your brother's keeper. Okay, does that make sense?
Um, it's kind of flesh that out for me. What do you mean by that?
From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. So everyone is responsible for their brother, and we're all brothers. So at this point there's only 4 men There's also 4 women as well, and so from those three brothers, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, all of humanity comes. We're all related to one of those 3 brothers, and we're all related to Noah. And so there isn't a separation between humanity. There isn't some black race. There isn't a white race. There isn't an Asian race. Race is not a thing in the Bible. It's all about different families. And so all these families eventually get spread out around the earth, and we have different characteristics because of the places that we end up. But that doesn't mean that we aren't all part of the same human family. And so what this verse is setting up is that because we all have human lifeblood, and because there is something special about blood, then because of that, we all are responsible for each other. We're all responsible to, if a man's in trouble, and or if there's a person that's in trouble that needs help, you're responsible to go help that person. I believe is what this verse is saying. Even if you didn't cause your brother or your sister to come to harm, if they're in harm's way and you don't do anything, then you're not acting according to what God's prescribed for humanity. And you can see that on people's consciences. A lot of people, if they were to come across somebody that was in pain or hurting and they didn't help them, it would, be something that eats away at them and makes them not, not feel good.
So it almost like I had to read this. I had to read verse 5 like 3 times, but because I thought basically there was one kind of thing going on here. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of every man. This kind of sounds like if whoever kills somebody, that thing or animal or man's blood is going to be required, right? Because that's just kind of what it seems like. And then it seemed like also from the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of a man. It almost seems like if you kill your brother, then your life is going to be required of you. That's the way I took it at first. And then I kept reading it and reading it and reading it. And these were like, so verse 5 right here, for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning, and from the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of every man. And then that's like point 1, right? And then point 2 is a little bit different. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of a man, because this isn't implying like death here. It's kind of I kind of see what you're seeing about like the responsibility part of it. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
So, yeah, surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. And it's just saying that you're responsible to not hurt other people. And I extrapolated a little bit from that out to say that you should probably go help them. And I think that's biblical as well. It just, from the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. So,
I'll support that because in like the very first like chapter of Exodus, Moses like kills that Egyptian, right? And
mhm.
then all the way in Acts, I was like, okay, when I first read this, I was like, so Moses murders an Egyptian like super quick in Exodus, and it's not even like they just like brush right past that, and then you get to Acts, like all the way in the New Testament, and Stephen is being like on trial with like the Jewish
Mhm.
leaders and stuff
Yep.
like that, and he basically says Moses, who came to like who was sent by God to help the Hebrews, they didn't recognize that God sent Moses to go help him those Hebrews right there. So there are times when people are oppressed and like wrongfully oppressed, and God will send people to go fix that. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
uh, uh interesting, right?
Mhm.
So all
Definitely.
right, let's move on here. I guess whoever sheds man's blood by blood by whoever
By
sheds
his blood.
man's yeah by
Sorry.
man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. And as for you, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply in it. Then God spoke to Noah and his sons by him saying, Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him saying, And as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, and all that go out of the ark. Every beast of the earth, thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you, and every living, me and you, and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth.
Mm-hmm.
It shall be, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. All right. So
So
now,
I want to point something out before we get into anything else. Um, who is the rainbow for?
the earth, okay, so it's a covenant between God and the earth, and it's a sign to humans that they're not going to get flooded. That's kind of what I just saw. The rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth.
Okay. Do you
But
see
it's
what
also,
I'm
you said,
highlighting?
and I will remember.
Mm-hmm. It's not
Okay,
for us. The rainbow is not a sign for us.
it's it's to remind God.
Correct. And so it's funny the people that are saying that because obviously the rainbow and pride and everything we're coming up into June and that's going to be a big deal. Um, but everybody says that people have taken away the rainbow as a sign and are using it for horrible purposes. No, what they're actually doing is they're taking that sign and every time that they use it, it's a reminder to God that He's not going to destroy us again with the flood. And ultimately, what's going to happen is that we won't be destroyed with a flood this time. It's going to be with fire when we ultimately get destroyed in the future.
Oof.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! I don't know if 2,000 years is long enough, but I'm just kidding. Actually, it's like 4,000 to 6,000, I think, for the Old Testament. But yeah. So I just wanted to point out that no one can take that sign and change it. That sign is a sign to God that will be used by Him to remember that He had mercy on us and that He wants to spare us, despite our horribly evil wickedness and the evil degenerate things that we've done to defile this planet and everything holy that we can, at least.
All right, and so post flood, God gives His covenant with the rainbow. And now, where do we go from there? Where does humanity kind of go from there in this history textbook we got here?
Yeah, so and I like that you called it that. It absolutely is a history textbook in a certain sense. I believe that this is the story of humanity, as opposed to the
Me
story
too.
that's told by scientists and by current modern historians that say that at one point we were lesser and then we evolved to be greater, and they carry that into our culture as well. So a lot of evolutionists and scientists in general and historians believe that man at one point was in a hunter-gatherer society, and then we morphed and changed and evolved and grew in our knowledge and understanding to become a technological society like we are today, and it was a steady progression from lesser to greater. Well, in reality, Adam and Eve had a far greater understanding of the universe than you or I do. And so to say what kind of technologies or what kind of machines and tools and things that Adam and Eve had at their disposal before the flood, I couldn't even imagine. And
How long were they living?
they each I don't know how long Eve lived. I don't think it says, but Adam lived to be over 900 years old. I think it was about 930,
Dude had
somewhere in that
9
range.
lives.
Basically, yeah. Um, but so just imagine he's a being that has directly communed with God, has a complete understanding of what the Garden of Eden was after he ate the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and now he's been put onto the earth. I can't even imagine what that kind of a person would accomplish. He was the perfect creation of a human and the least flawed of us all in a certain sense, right? And
Yeah,
so
it's hard to kind of wrap my mind around. I don't even like
so
think
I
that
don't
way sometimes.
so what the Bible teaches me and what historians teach me are diametrically opposed. I believe that we were at a greater state of society and culture and possibly even technology before the flood. We lost that. We had a stumbling, and we went back to obviously in the flood everything got destroyed. And so when you see Noah come out the other side, there isn't a time when he builds culture. He doesn't go and turn into a hunter gatherer society for 1,000 years. He actually just shows up, and it just goes into them starting to do stuff. So it talks about Noah, the ark, blessed there. Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Okay, so he lives for a total of 950 years, at 350 of which are after the flood. Okay? And so he's got a ton of time to be. He didn't revert back and become some dumb hunter gatherer that didn't know the stuff that he learned from before the flood. Okay? I think the
That's
only
crazy. Yeah.
and so him, his sons who were all born before the flood as well. Okay, they weren't born after the flood, and so they're also probably, I don't know what their ages are, but they're probably old enough that they know what's going on, that they've seen the wickedness and evil in society from before the flood, and now they're also they also know all about all of their technology and whatever advancements they may have made. And so, I think that we were in a much higher state than what we give them credit for, because now we see, I believe in okay, so in chapter 10, it's going to list all of the nations of the earth, but really what they are is it starts off as families. Okay, so in chapter 10, verse 1, it says, "Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and sons were born to them after the flood." So each of these three had sons, and like I've been saying, these the, every human being can trace their lineage back to one of these three brothers. And so then it goes and it lists all of the different what are then called tribes. Okay? And so these are the first sons of each of them. And so I believe that there ends up being about 72 tribes or families that are connected to these three brothers ultimately. And so what we see after the Tower of Babel, I believe, so this whole chapter is just listing off names of families and stuff. Do you want to read that, or do you want to just kind of skip over it?
The names of families, that's more of a study thing.
Yeah, so
Um,
if you want to know all the names of the families, go and study chapter 10, because you can then go and start connecting these families to real world actual nations,
Modern day people, yeah.
modern day people, modern day tribes,
So you can
and
find out where your ancestry connects to those people, and then those people connect to these people in the Bible. And so, yeah.
exactly. Yep. And so what you'll find is that a lot of the names here are different than what you'll see today in modern times, because we're looking at their names in English. These are names that are being translated from ancient Hebrew. There's a lot of changes that have happened in that time frame. But my belief is that every single person can trace their family lineage back to one of, or all three of, or a mixture of all of these different families. And so that's important, because what it teaches us is that we're not different. There isn't a subhuman race of people. They're human beings are human beings. If you're not a human being, then you're something else. You're an ape or a monkey, and you're not talking, you're not interacting. We can't have children together. Okay? And so if we're all human beings, we all share uh lineage all the way back to Noah. I shouldn't treat anyone else differently based upon some characteristic, like the color of their skin, or how big their nose is, or some stupid characteristic that would be evil and wrong you know, to judge somebody by. That's what the Bible teaches us, is that we're all part of the human family. And so that's the importance of chapter 10 in the Bible. I would also imagine, if I were to go and do a study on these different names and the meanings behind the names, that would be beneficial as well. There's probably a lot of knowledge in there, but we don't have time to get into all those little nitty gritty details.
That could be for like a future episode or something. We can definitely nitty gritty that for a
Uh,
little bit.
we'll definitely touch on different things about it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll move on to chapter 11, and this is going to be a chapter that more
Tower of
people,
Babel.
yes, are familiar with, the Tower of Babel. I want to go over this very slowly. Okay, so as you read it, I might stop you. The reason for that is a lot of times the way that this is taught to children, or if you've just kind of read this over real quickly, you might not see some key details that I think are very important. Okay,
Okay.
so we'll want to look at what the state of these different things are. What are they complete? Are they not complete? When does God show up? What is complete? What isn't complete? Okay.
Okay.
So I'll leave it vague right there, but I'll highlight some things as we go. If you want to start chapter
I'll start with
11,
this
verse 1.
paragraph. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and scroll up just a little bit for me.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech. I imagine like speech kind of meaning dialect or something, but
It
and
it
it
it,
came
it just means language.
okay. Um and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Then they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar.
Okay.
And they said,
Um
okay,
so just one thing to notice, it's being very specific as to the types of materials that this building is being made out of. Okay, it tells you that it's in the plain in the land of Shinar. Now that might not mean much to us in 2022 or 2023. Wow, we're already in 2023. My gosh, um, uh,
don't think
but
about it.
Shinar is a place that whoever wrote this that meant something to. And then it says specifically they had brick for stone, so that's made out of certain materials, and they had asphalt for mortar, and that is another specific material. And so, especially in ancient times, there weren't you didn't just have the ability to go and order whatever you needed to off of Amazon and have it shipped to you. So if you wanted to build something, you had to use the materials that were in the area. And so like the Egyptians would go and quarry their the the stones that they used for the pyramids at a place that was in Egypt. Now it was really far away, and it's impressive that they were able to move those giant stones as far as they did. But today we'd put it on a truck and it'd be there in 20 minutes. Like
Yeah.
maybe not that quick, but it's practically that that close, right? And so in the Tower of Babel, there is a specific place called the Plain of Shinar, and we can try to determine where that is based off of the types of materials that exist in different areas. So if we think that one place is the Plain of Shinar, if it doesn't have the materials you need to make bricks, and if it doesn't have the material or whatever you need to have asphalt for the mortar, then that couldn't be the place, right? And so we're given very specific details as to what this location is. So this is not mythology. This is not, some story that's being told around a campfire. This is someone who is trying to communicate very specific information. And at the very least, the author, who I believe is God, but the author had a very specific place in mind. Whether or not there was a tower there, you could debate that, but the author had a specific place in mind. And I believe that there was a tower there. Okay. So we'll continue back with verse 4.
All right. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth."
Okay.
All right. Did you want me to keep going?
Yeah, let's keep going.
All right, but the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, "Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. Now nothing they propose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there all wait. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city.
Okay, so that's a good place to stop. Let's go back up to verse 5, and it said, "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men
So these are two
had
different
built."
things.
Okay? Yes. So the city is one thing. He came down to see the city and the tower, and I think very specifically, this is one thought, the tower which the sons of men had built. Okay? And my belief is that they had finished the the Tower of Babel. So when I got taught it as a kid, somehow the impression that I had was that the tower was never
Hang on,
built because I was
yeah.
literally like point blank told by adults that the point of the tower was to go up into space. Okay, I was told that like it was supposed to leave the earth and go into heaven. And the reality is that that's not exactly the purpose of the Tower of Babel. The purpose of the Tower of Babel was to go and to meet with God on man's terms. That was its purpose. It was to elevate us up to God. So instead of God having to come down to meet with us, we
We're over
could
here
go
like,
up
look,
to
here I
meet.
am.
Well,
Yeah.
we can go up to meet with God and be on His level on our terms with our sin. Okay, and so they had completed the structure that would ultimately be the Tower of Babel, and that might still be standing. To be completely honest, it is possible that the Tower of Babel still exists and is standing somewhere. Unless does it say he destroyed it? I can't remember. Maybe he said he destroyed. No, he just scattered them. Yeah, yeah. So it is possible that the tower is still standing. Now, the part of it that wasn't finished at the time was the city, and so, um, and the
They
Lord said,
ceased building the city
yes, they ceased building the city. They didn't cease building the tower. The tower had already
that,
been finished.
that the sons of men had built.
Yes,
That's a
exactly.
past tense right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and again, this is another segment in this passage. Um, it says in verse 7, "Let us go." God is using a plural for Himself.
Capital plural. That's weird.
Yes. So that's an interesting uh phrase, and you'll see that pop up in different places in Genesis and throughout the Bible
Yeah.
where God refers to
Let
himself
us make man
plurally. Mm-hmm.
in our image. Yeah.
Yep. And so as Christians, we believe in the Trinity, and this is one of the building blocks that we would use to build the foundation for the belief in the Trinity. So we can complete that structure when we get to the New Testament with Jesus and the claims that he makes, but we'll get there when we get there. And so what we see is that this ziggurat, so it ultimately is what's called a ziggurat, and we'll go to. Let me see if I can find you a picture. The city. Er, okay. So it would have looked something like. Can you see that? Let's see how that shows up.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's
No.
in view.
The problem is it's not in view for the audience very well. I don't know how to fix that on the fly. All right, I tried, but it looks like the like a ziggurat that you would find in the ancient Mesopotamian area. And so it'll be a temple that's got steps going up, and then it's got a flat top at a flat part at the top. That's where different rituals could be performed. If you look at the Aztec temples of this kind, you'll see that that's where they performed human sacrifices and horrible atrocities. I'm not sure what these people at the Tower of Babel had planned. My guess is that it wasn't to do human sacrifice, and that it was actually probably very much closer to meet with God. So you would imagine that these people have the stories of Adam and Eve. They have the stories of Noah, and they're all related to one of his sons. And so they know very directly that God is a real being that can be communed with, and that their ancestors, Adam and Eve, directly walked with him. And so they want to kind of try to get back into the garden or get back into an area where they can directly be with and communicate with God. And that was their sin. they knew that that wasn't right. They had been taught that in Genesis, Adam and Eve got told that they could never go back to the garden, and so human beings, the story of the rest of humanity is God ultimately bringing Jesus about to save us from the consequences of our sins, and humanity just finding more and more new ways to sin and to do things horribly evil and wrong. All right. What else do you have for me? You have any questions here, or what do we want to do here? Because now we're just
Um,
getting into kind of genealogy stuff. So,
all
yeah,
right, let's
go.
just keep
So the Lord.
going into
Oh,
Genesis.
I'm sorry. I forgot the scattered part. Um, so let's say, and we'll just go. We'll start with chapter 6. And the Lord said, "Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. Now, nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore, its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. One thing to note is that to babble comes from that term. So if you're a person who babbles on, you are have that is a term because of the city of Babel. And so there's a few things from the Bible that show up even in English. Babel would be one. Lament is another, and we'll talk about that when we get to that book at some point. And so then it gets into the genealogies. So it'll tell you the genealogy of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and then it just goes into a bunch of genealogies and gets us all the way to Abram. And so Abram is going to be the
Yes.
next big character in the Bible. And so right now his name is Abram, like the tank, and later it will be changed to Abraham, and we'll see that story as we read it coming up. So Terah. So Abram had a father, his name was Terah, and Terah had a grandson named Lot. So Abram is Lot's uncle, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife. So one thing to note at this point, it is not culturally as disgusting to marry people who are your brothers and sisters, and definitely not half brothers and half sisters. That would be because with Adam and Eve, that wouldn't have been a problem because everybody at that point would have been brothers and sisters and all that horror and all that stuff that we would find disgusting. And then that all got restarted again with Shem, Ham, and Japheth when there's only three brothers. It's hard not to be married. You can't not marry a cousin. And so what we'll see here is that Abram and Sarah, or Sarai, his wife, are actually also very closely related. She is Abram's half sister, I believe. And so that's important later. Abram passes Sarai off as his sister in at least one different place, and so technically he's not lying when he does that.
Go up really quick. Where do we segue into even kind of this story?
It's literally just
Um, oh,
genealogies.
go down, go down. So, right at the end of the genealogies, it starts to segue into right there. The Terra um lived 70 years and we got oh I guess yeah we got Abraham and Abraham died but we're still yeah okay it's still in like the okay it's right there the daughter Milcah and the but Sarai was barren and she had no child. I guess not. It does start in 31. Okay.
Yeah, I got it. I got it started right where the story started. So, um, okay, why don't you start reading for us at 31?
All right, and Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot and the son of Haran and his daughter-in-law Sarai, and his son Abram's wife. And they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran.
Okay. So we're going to move over to chapter 12. And here is the Lord talking to Abram.
All right. Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. I will make you a great nation. That's interesting. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in all the families of the earth, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So this is interesting. Is God speaking to directly to Abraham right here?
Yes, so God is promising Abraham that in him get out he's saying get out of your country, from your family and from your father's house and go to Canaan, and if you do this, I will make your name great, I being God. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And I want to again say families, not races, not you know, not just white people, not just Jews. All the families of the earth will be blessed. So that means everybody. So again, no race in the Bible, just families. All right. So yeah, this is the first promise that is being given to Abraham. And so we see it based on his faith that Abraham has to get out of his country from his family. And so we
All
see,
right.
yeah, let's read on from verse 4.
So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And and Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son, and all of their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites were in the land. That was a lot. That was that was a mouthful. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. That's so interesting. And he
Mm-hmm.
moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. Okay, let me read that one time. And he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So Abram journeyed, going on still towards the south.
Okay. So that's Abram's first excursion into Canaan. Uh, but he then goes on and continues the journey down into Egypt. And so this is where we see Abram first get into Egypt. This is the first place that we see Egypt show up in the Bible. And what we see is that Egypt is already a fully formed and functioning society.
That's
So
so crazy.
but so are all of the city states that Abram came from, right?
Yeah, like, do you know anything about like Canaan and those like little places, like Horeb and like all those little
Okay.
places?
Well, so Canaan and Horeb are different. I'm talking about originally I was talking about Ur of the Chaldeans,
Oh,
where Abram comes from. That was a fully functioning society of people that had built a giant ziggurat.
isn't
That
that in
was
like Iraq or Iran, modern day Iran or something like that?
correct. It's in that Middle East area, the Fertile Crescent, as it's called. And
Oh, okay.
so that city is able to exist because of the rivers that are there. So that's a fully functioning society coexistent with Egypt. And then we see Abram go down into Egypt as its own fully functioning kingdom society. And we'll see him interact with the king there. But again, I just want to point out that what the Bible teaches us and what it shows is not a slow, gradual evolution of human beings from tribal and hunter gatherers into city dwellers. From the beginning of humanity, we've lived in cities, and we have had societies where we are good. We are not good to each other, but where we can do commerce with each other, where we can work with each other and
Families
act
are living
civilly.
life next to each other, and then you eventually, this person moves out, builds a house, this person moves out, builds a house, and then
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of turns into a city. We're all living life next to each other, and then there's like a city off in the distance, and I'm gonna trade my this for your that, and then it just becomes that's just kind of what it is. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is, people might say that when the Tower of Babel was destroyed, that turned people into like hunter gatherers. We don't see that anywhere. They just immediately go and begin starting to build new cities. See what
Oh,
I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
so
You never
nowhere.
see that in humanity that they were just like throwing spears at stuff. Like, I'm not saying
Yeah,
that never happened, but
yeah.
it's like,
Of course, we
yeah.
still have hunter gatherers today, but I think those are people that learned how to survive in a certain area using certain techniques, and that they kept doing that because that's what that area prescribed. But they lost something. It's not like they were at a, it's not like they started off at that lower point and then we progressed into something bigger and greater. That's what I'm trying to say. I think that those people could be civilized. They originally were part of a group of people that were civilized. They got separated from it. They are under some weird tribal chieftain thing. They're weirdos that should be brought back into the fold of society. And so
Ah,
my
okay.
belief is those tribes in the Amazon. My belief is there's a tribe in India that hasn't had contact with human beings in thousands of years, other human beings for thousands of years. Obviously, they are human beings
Other than
themselves.
their own.
Yeah, I believe they should be brought into normal human society in the 21st century, right? They would be better off if we could figure out how to get them to be normalized with us. They could have modern medicine. They could, actually not have to go and hunt for their food. They could get, guaranteed meals every
Like,
day. Like,
what is it like when in like a society when you don't have to worry about like your shelter, then and you don't have to worry about like your food, you
yeah.
could start worrying about other things. Like, what is that? I can't remember what that is.
So that's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so
I think,
right
yeah,
now,
okay.
all of these tribal people are at the lowest portion of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They don't even have where their next meal's going to come from 100% worked out. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, I don't know exactly where my meal's coming from, but I know that Stater Brothers is going to be open tomorrow, Lord willing, right? But they
Yeah.
don't know if their trap's going to have a rat in it for them to eat. Okay, that's the level that these people are living at. And it's not a good beneficial thing. We're not being good people by not going and bringing society to them. We're actually doing them a massive disservice. But because of, TV shows like Star Trek that talk about principles about not going and intervening with people, because of stuff like that, we've got it in our brains that we need to isolate these tribes and keep them from being brought back into the fold of the rest of the human civilization.
We should interact with them and offer, like, hey, do you want these things? Do you want, like, let me show you how to farm. Let me show you how to this. We should approach them and offer civilization to them. We don't have to force it upon them. They could,
I,
but you're gonna have
yeah.
defectors that want it.
I think that so in the case of the place over in India, it's illegal for me to try to go there. Now it's also they also try to kill you if you try to go to their island, but I don't think that we should be isolating them and not we should be trying to go about making contact with them and
Do
not
they look
isolating
Indian?
them. I'm not sure. I think they do. Most like
Okay. Because
they're
I
the
know India
same.
is part of like they're South Asia, right? So I imagine if you have some tribe that people haven't seen in like a long time, that they might they either look exactly like mainland India or they look some other thing, right? So I'm
It
like curious to see what they look, but we wouldn't know. We wouldn't have photos of them, right?
We don't have up close photos. They have dark skin. We've got decently good photos of them, just not like they sat down for a portrait at Sears photos.
I
We've got
see.
like they came out. People on a plane took super zoomed in telephoto lens pictures of them. that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
imagine their dark complexion because they're in the sun a lot or something like that. I don't know.
I think that they have black skin. I'm not sure if it's Indian, if it's related to Indian or if it's related to. So there's a lot of Aboriginal peoples on the islands in that area. So they could have been an Aboriginal people uh, that sailed up there to that island. I don't know. I don't know what their genealogy is. But at one point, they were part of normal civilized human society, and then
And
they
they
got
defected.
separated. But yeah, well, they after the Tower of Babel, everybody got scattered to go and go across the whole earth.
Oh, their descendants were civilized, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Oh,
their descendants were
ancestors.
yeah, their
Sorry, their
ancestors
ancestors.
were in a city. Okay, at some point, their ancestors were in a city. And so we try to treat them like they're some different people whose ancestors were never in a city. No, the Bible teaches us that these people were at the Tower of Babel. They lived in a society of other human beings that had all of this technology, good enough to build a giant tower that they wanted to go up on and meet with and commune with God on. Okay, that's not nothing. That's not hunter gatherer spears. That's way more than that. And we
Language
want
and technology and architecture at this point, like that's a lot at that point.
exactly. And so what happened is they got spread out and they got they got isolated and they got put under some crazy weird ruler that, lost all that stuff for them, right? They had a bad leader that took them down a bad road and they got stuck on this horrible island where they haven't been able to progress for 2000 years or 4000 years or however long it's been. And so that's
Yeah, I imagine if I moved off to an island with my current knowledge, I imagine I wouldn't have people to correct my thinking, and I imagine I'd come up with some interesting stuff, you know?
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is, how long would your shirt last, right? So,
Oh, then you end up being these people that like have loincloths from leaves and stuff like that, and
what are
that's
your children
interesting.
going to wear? You know what I mean? Like, your shirt that you're wearing will last you like maybe a year of heavy like work and you having to chop down trees and,
We'll
dig
say
ditches, right?
extremely conserv no, we'll say like extremely liberally, like 5 years.
Yeah,
Let's say
exactly. Like that might be how long it lasts now.
right.
You know what I mean? It might not last 5 years now, but imagine on the island, it's not going to last nearly that long. So literally, your kids are going to be in not
They're
that.
naked. They're gonna be naked.
Well, they're going to
Yeah.
be in whatever clothing you make for them out of whatever you got on the island, and so they immediately look like you reverted back to Stone Age technology.
Oh, that's really interesting because like especially if you had a couple sheep or something hairy on your thing and fashioned some clothes or some kind of or even if you had some kind of plant that you could take the fibers and spin together to make some kind of thing it's you're gonna get down to like you're gonna look like you're wearing leather or some really old sackcloth or some you're gonna look
Mm-hmm.
interesting for sure.
But the other thing is, do you know how to do any of those things? Would you know how to take a sheep and turn its wool into a shirt?
Not with my current like set of skills for sure, no.
And so like you would look real crude for that first couple generations. And so that's
Yeah.
my belief is that those people that are stuck on that island, that's a curse. That is not a good thing. You don't want to go live that life. Okay? And so for us to not be attempting to reach out to them, not attempt to show them that we have all of this incredible technology and all of these wonderful things that could help ease their life and make them significantly healthier and happier in many ways. Okay, one of the things that's gross to us as Westerners is you don't realize how many parasites these people have on them or in them. Okay, like they're
Like they
literally
need vaccines pronto or something like
they need anti-parasitic, you know what I mean? Like they're literally they have all of these creatures sucking their blood.
oh, that's so interesting. Well, that's
Okay,
unfortunate. I don't mean it like
right?
interesting,
Like
but
would you want to live without would you want to live with God knows what? It's just
something
horrible.
bored under my skin and has been sucking my
Yeah.
blood for like
Oh,
5 years. Yeah.
ringworm, tapeworm, all sorts of worms. It's just the worst.
And they
It is
also probably have to deal with like viruses and different stuff too. Yeah, I can't imagine it's a
um
good life.
so that
Hopefully they've developed sanitation practices and different things, but I don't know.
doubtful. Um but the other thing is like yeah, so I my heart goes out to these people. I don't find it to be a beneficial thing that we're isolating them. The
So it's
only
inhuman
I,
to not like not intervene, but to not like approach them. They're gonna try to kill you, but to say like, "Hey, dude, we've got food,"
yeah,
you
we should
know.
be like we should be airdropping them food. We should be like trying to figure out how we can communicate with
Oh,
them. You know,
dude.
send
Oh man.
recordings, right? We should be sending drones that can like give them like we could send like
Indian Bibles translated in Indian language and
well they
drop down in like a care packet. I don't know.
they don't know how to read. They don't have written language to my understanding. Um
Oh,
and so but what we
man.
could do is we know roughly what their speech is like, and we can send in a robot that's got, you know,
Play speakers, play audio.
yeah, but we could have a Skype chat with them because
Oh my.
okay, like
So
it
you
can
could drop like this little cube and that has a little screen and speakers and you could just
yeah.
connect to that like that's interesting. Holy
Mhm.
cow, and just be like, "Hey, we're on the mainland. Are we can we come in without you spearing us to death?" In like their
Yeah.
own language. That's funny.
Exactly. Exactly. And they may see us as some kind of like gods for a minute, but as soon as we show
Until we
up
show them how we did it.
and we're
We
just
we
human
take the
beings.
Wizard of Oz curtain off and we're just like, yeah.
But again,
Oh man.
it's not a kindness to isolate them even though they don't want us to come on the island as it is,
They
right?
perceive their lifestyle as comfortability, but they don't understand they're not comfortable. And that's the whole
Exactly.
thing. They would tell you that they're happy, and this is a huge issue with deception and as a whole. And I've been thinking a lot about this because like I've been looking at people having debates, and it's like I want to say that if you follow biblical principles that you're going to be happier, and somebody's going to say, well, if you look at these statistics, you could say that this person who's actually a prostitute in Las Vegas, they're very happy. And it's like, yeah, well, you're going to report happiness when you're living in sin and when you're deceived as a whole. So it's like you don't understand until you submit yourself to God and you live the life and you know that He has
Mhm.
planned for you, how amazing it actually is and how much life and abundance and blessings there are. But then it's like deception's wild because you think you're good, you think you're fine, and it's just like you don't even ask for help because you don't even know you have a problem. That's how
Mhm.
wild deception is. Like it's I don't know. It's
Yep.
sorry for that
Absolutely.
TED talk.
No. That's perfect. I couldn't agree more that you know they're being deceived and that's an issue obviously. All right, so do we want to keep walking through the Old Testament? Where we at? We're in Egypt now. Abram is in
What I
Egypt.
wanna what I wanna do really quick is let's just speed run through, and obviously there's gonna be points where we stretch it out a little bit, but let me just kind of get to Isaac, and then let me get to the sacrifice attempt. Let's just start reading this really quick and we can talk about that. I want to get to Jacob and Judah and like the tribes and stuff like that, because once we get there it'll start to we'll get close to Joseph, and then that's kind of ultimately what I'm trying to get to. I want to just get through the heroes of the Old Testament, and because there's a ton in Genesis, and there's like I what is it Isaac and Rebecca, is it Isaac and Rebecca, or is it Jacob and Rebecca? I don't know. Where he had to work for
I
this her dad for 7 years, and he's like, "Psych, you're working 7 more years." Like,
That was Jacob.
yeah, and he's
Okay,
like, "I don't even care." Like, yeah.
so he did care. He was very upset by it, but that
No, I
we'll get
know,
into
but
all that. Yeah. Um. Okay. So Abram goes into Egypt. He lies to the Egyptians and says, well, again, it's a half lie because Sarah is his sister, but she's also his wife. And what
he's not
happens?
fully honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but well, and in a way that could lead to some massive problems because what happened at that point was Pharaoh took his sister from him and put her into his harem. Okay.
And he understood that the Lord was there was something that Pharaoh knew, that God had power. I remember because he's like, dude,
Yes.
you could have caused me to have some like
Mm-hmm.
you could have stumbled me hard if you like if I would have followed through with this. I could have been like cursed by your God kind of thing. Like it was like he understood that the Lord had power, which is interesting. And these are like the former pharaohs, because once you get to the pharaoh that's like after Joseph, that didn't know Joseph anymore, Egypt starts getting ran in a completely different way. But
So
like,
yeah, so here's where here's what you were talking about in verse 17 of chapter 12. We see here, but the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife?
how did
Why
he
did you
know?
say, she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, well, I think God,
God spoke to him.
see, this is the wife.
He must have surmised by getting plagued.
Yeah, because there is one where where the person gets a dream. I think that's a so there's two very similar stories. There's one in Egypt here where Abram passes Sarai off as his sister, and obviously Pharaoh gets upset. Um, and then another one where the exact same thing happens, but God then gives that person dreams. So this one, it just seems like the plagues. I think he just knows because of the plagues somehow.
Again, this might be like one of those they just have context because they're closer to the creation. They just know the Lord. You can't not know God at this
I
point. Like you're so early in humanity that just everybody knows God is God. Like
so
that's my opinion.
I understand where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with the thought behind what you're saying, but I think by this point things had started to degrade very severely.
Was this like
Okay,
several thousand years after
this
creation?
wasn't this wasn't well. Okay, so it was so there's creation and there's after Noah. Okay, those are two separate things.
You could
So
say that it started after Noah, like
it,
kind of like
it
a
like Noah had perfect knowledge of who Adam and Eve were. He might have even been alive at a point where they were alive as well. I'm not sure about the genealogies, so it's
oh.
possible. It's possible no one knew Adam. Like I haven't done the math on that, but that is a possibility. Okay, and so Noah had perfect knowledge of God and who he is, not perfect, but had enough knowledge to be saved. And so he took that after the flood and obviously passed that down to his children, who also might have been born at a point where they could have known Adam and Eve as well. I'm not sure about that, but it's close, I believe. And so, um, what we see in that story is that, what we see is that since then that knowledge has degraded. The farther you get from Noah, the more and more degraded our understanding of who God is and how to worship him is, until God interjects himself into the story and changes things. And so in Egypt, I don't think they were following the one true God. I don't think they were worshiping God the Father in Egypt at that point. They probably
No,
already
I just
had
think he
their
had
own.
knowledge of him.
I don't know, because if you're not worshiping him, I don't know what your knowledge of him would be, right? If
Well,
so,
because
let's say
their
so
thing
let
was like Horus and Ra and all that other stuff. I just think that they thought that the reality was that everything was polytheistic and that there was just a bunch of gods everywhere. Like
so
so,
then
and that
so
the
then
Lord
they
was
don't.
one of them.
Well, they might have included the Lord as one of them, but ultimately that's not even the same God. Like that would just be saying that, oh, we're worshiping some other, like he's not just one of a bunch of gods, right? He is the
No, I
creator
know.
of the universe. And so if you look at the mythologies that they were going by at that time, my belief is that all of their gods are actually demons or fallen angels, whatever the technical term is, Benai Ha Elohim. They are actual real beings that have powers that would seem that are superhuman, but they're not actual angels. They're not actual gods. They're just created beings by God that have extra powers. And then they deny God as the creator, or they say they defeated God as the creator. At least in the Greek version of these stories, they defeat God and lock him away, right? And so that's my belief is that's the religion they were worshiping. So the demons claim that they defeated the creator and locked him away, and then later on they might let you worship a god that they call, God, but they wouldn't. But it would just be another one of multiple gods, not the creator. Does that make sense? When sorry, I'm skipping over a lot of stuff. When Jews show up on the scene, they're an actual people group that have a plot of land. At that point, other people start worshiping their god as a regional god. Before then, I don't think we see God being worshipped like he's a regional god before that,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
right?
Like how
So
like
so
it's
you'll
like coming to America, you kind of think that like, oh, everybody here is Christian, so I'm gonna just like kind of go to church because I'm in America or something. Like, that would kind of be like how you're describing that or something.
kinda, but yeah. So that might not have made much sense. So we'll just move on. Abram is in Egypt, and he's passed his wife off as his sister. That caused the Egyptian pharaoh to be mad at them. And then we see that he sends him. Then we see that the pharaoh sends him away, but doesn't actually hurt him. Probably because he sees that there is some connection between Abram and it's maybe God. I don't know. I don't know exactly how that all works out. So we move into chapter 13, where Abram inherits Canaan. Then Abram went. So you want to read that?
All right, then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, to the south. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. So
Okay.
is this kind of saying like my manager and your manager are beefing, but we're cool?
Uh, no, it's kind of the opposite. It's
It's
all
like
of the
we're not
herds.
cool, but
So
oh,
all
okay.
of the herdsmen. So there's only so much land, and and Abram and Lot are trying to live together, and they're both being so successful that the land can't support the thousands and thousands of animals that they have on it.
They're
And
running out of
so
space.
when there's a well, the herdsmen are fighting with each other to get water out of the well. When there's a field that has some grub, some shrubs for the sheep to eat, they're fighting over those fields to have the sheep go graze in them. And so they both realize we're both being so successful, we have to go our separate ways at this point. We're going to try to stay close to each other, as close as we can, but we can't both be living right next to each other anymore. So Abrams magnanimously says, I'm going to let you choose where you want to go.
I'll
Lot
go somewhere
chooses,
else.
and then he's going to go the opposite direction. And so Lot decides, I'm going to go over towards the land of Sodom and Gomorrah, and there's actually a third city that gets spared, but that comes in a little bit.
What is Abram and Lot's relationship?
As we saw earlier, Lot is Abram's nephew, so he is the grandson of Abram's father, Terah. Okay, and so he really cares about Lot. He has he loves him, and yeah. So we'll see that where that goes. Yeah. So and in verse 10 it says, and Lot lifted his eyes and saw all of the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord. And so he basically goes, man, this place looks like the Garden of Eden. That's where I'm going. And then Abram is going to go the opposite way. And ultimately, what we
Okay.
see is that Lot chose to go towards the land that had all of the things that he needed to live on, but it was also close to some cities with people in it that corrupt his character and lead him into some horrible things. And I guess Lot's character isn't 100% corrupted, but it's an interesting story. So
He
we'll
was
we'll
yeah,
we'll
there's
we'll,
a
we'll skip to that. We'll skip to that story actually. So, oh, actually, sorry. Before that, I'm gonna talk about a story in chapter 14 of Genesis. I highly recommend that you go and read this. So, this is actually very important to Christianity and to uh, our high priest today. Funny enough, and so in chapter 14,
who's
we
that? Who's our high priest today?
our high priest today is Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And do you know whose priestly line he is in?
David?
Nope. The
Adam.
kings cannot be priests in Jewish custom. So he is
I don't
not.
know.
So David is not in the line to be high priest. A high priest must be a Levite, specifically a son of
Aaron or
Aaron.
Moses?
Um,
Yeah.
I believe. And what we see is that that is a Jewish high priest, but our high priest is not in the line of Jewish high priests. He is in a line of Gentile high priests.
I
Uh,
don't understand.
yep, and you will find out right now. So what we see in chapter 14 is that Lot gets taken captive by so here it is in chapter 14. And it came to pass in the days of Amphrael king of Shinar, Arioch king of Elasar, Cherdolamer king of Elam, and Tidal king of nations, that they made war with Bera king of Sodom, Bersha king of Gomorrah, Shinab king of Adamah. Okay, so we see this big list. There's two different sides, both of which have a bunch of kings on them. Okay, and what we see is that all these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer, cannot pronounce that, and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, and basically they attacked each other. Okay. Um, and the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of against now full of asphalt pits. The king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Okay, so basically there is a fight between two different sides that each have a bunch of different kings that have allied themselves against each other. It's actually it sounds a lot like a description of like World War II with a bunch of entangling alliances. All these different countries are coming together to fight each other. But what we see here is that Lot, Abram's nephew, gets caught up in this political turmoil. So there's this big war that's going on between a bunch of different kingdoms. And we see in verse 12, they also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So they took and they kidnapped Lot, and that brings in Abram. Okay? Then the one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite brother of Eshcol. So somebody in Lot's house goes and tells Abram about what's going on, and so that brings Abram into this whole fight. Okay? And so ultimately, what we see is that now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And so
He had an
Dan's
army?
he had
Jeez.
his own 300-person army, and these were people that were trained to be part of his army for their whole lives, basically.
What?
Okay.
I'm gonna have like 10 sons. I'm gonna train them all for freaking battle, dude.
But these weren't his sons. These were people born to like servants and stuff in his
Oh
household.
wow.
So he didn't have his own sons at this point. He had just been so successful in absolutely everything else that he had been able to get this whole community of people around him. And so he had enough
Wow.
people that he could go mount his own raid, and he went and he took on the other army that had stolen Lot, defeats them, and then what we see is that what he does Then what we see is that Abram and Melchizedek in verse 18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, which I believe means king of righteousness, brought out, or is that, yeah, I believe it's king of righteousness, brought out bread and wine. He
Bread
was
and wine.
he
Hmm.
was the priest of God Most High. Let's just highlight that. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And he, Abram, gave him, Melchizedek, a tithe of all. Okay?
A
So,
tenth.
this is where we see Melchizedek enter into the story. And
Who's like
so
a very vague character.
So he is a very vague character, and what we see in Hebrews is that Jesus Christ is a high priest in the line of Melchizedek, not in the line of the Levites.
So
Okay?
why, dude? That's so we know nothing about Melchizedek, and then it's like, yeah, Jesus is a high priest in the line of Melchizedek. It sucks because these people would have known about Melchizedek, and I feel like you have to like study Jewish literature to know about Melchizedek or something like that.
I don't think we need to see anything outside of the Bible in order to understand what the Bible wants us to know. What I would say is that we aren't supposed to know a whole lot about him. What we're supposed to know is that he is a Gentile who serves the Most High God, or God Most
How do we know he's
High.
a Gentile?
I mean, he's not. There are no Jews.
Oh, I guess it
Abram,
makes sense. Oh, because wait, the founder of the Jewish nation is Abraham with the covenant of
yes,
circumcision, right? Okay.
exactly. And so there are no Jews, and so he has to be a Gentile. And so we see Abram, who is giving offerings to God Most High through this high priest. And so,
Interesting. So there still are servants of God, but nobody's a Jew at this point.
exactly,
That's interesting.
there's always been servants of God. The
I guess you just
Jews,
have to delineate from Hebrew, because I've conflated Hebrew and Jewish together because they really are. But
what
like,
do you why Hebrew and Jewish are the same? That's the
no, I mean like because
Jewish people
Abram
speak Hebrew.
wasn't. No, I'm saying like these people. Melchizedek was probably like Hebrew, Noah Hebrew, all
No,
these people
no,
Hebrew. No.
no.
Oh, okay. Then I guess
They're
I don't. I'm
Gentiles.
missing something.
I don't know what you're missing. Hebrew is the language of the Jews.
Oh, then I guess I just
He,
don't understand. I thought that was like an
Hebrew is also
ethnicity or something.
of Jews. It means Jew. Hebrew equals Jew. The same thing.
Oh, I guess yeah.
Like you
I
can
didn't
literally
understand that. I
use
guess.
them interchangeably. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I did not know that.
But this is so Melchizedek is outside of all of that. He is not Jewish or in any way Hebrew. Okay, he's a Gentile. Okay, so what we see is uh that Abram takes time to go and receive a blessing from Melchizedek after giving him a tithe. And so this is where we see the tithe instituted. Not that we are all commanded to give 10% to the church. I don't believe that that's a command that we're given anywhere in the Bible. But in this circumstance, after a great victory, when there was a lot of spoils to go around, Abram came by and gave Melchizedek a tenth of that to honor God Most High.
A really quick call to action. If you think that we as Christians are supposed to tithe, put that in the comments, and we'll have to go over that and discuss that. But go ahead, continue. I want some people to challenge a point that we make, and I want to bring some people on and stuff. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. All right, so we'll move on. Um, what else is there?
So we've got all right, Abram. I guess we're leading up to the covenant at this point. Um, we're leading up to Isaac and the camp and Hagar, and that's basically where we're at, I think.
Yeah, here. Why don't you ask me some questions? I don't know exactly what you want to do here.
All
So
right, so let's I'm kind of just bullet pointing and take me to where Abram is. Gets a promise for a child or something like that. Let's do that.
Okay. Uh,
It's probably this. Yeah, it's probably Hagar and Ishmael.
so wait. What about Hagar and Ishmael?
I
So
just want so there's like a promise to Abraham that he's gonna get a son, and then they can't seem to wait, and then Sarah offers Hagar to Abram. Is and this is the promise of Isaac, but instead produces Ishmael, which ties into like um whole nother like sect of people that I think it has to do with like Islam and like Palestine and like stuff like that. I've heard people say that like um Palestinians can trace like bloodlines back to like Ishmael and stuff like that, or
so
like
there is no group of people that are Palestinian. That is a
uh,
that's a made
I'm doing
up
the same thing
like
with Hebrew.
yeah.
or so.
No, well, okay, so the people groups in the land of Canaan are very it's a very hot button issue, but the Palestinians are not a historic group of people. All right. So if you look like back
I,
in the biblical
yeah.
time, there was no group of people called Palestinians. What Palestine is it actually is the Roman word for Philistia or the Philistines. So there are a group of people that used to be the
Oh,
Philistines, okay, but these modern day Palestinians are not Philistines, but they are using the names all get jumbled up and mixed up because there's Roman versions and Western versions and all sorts of stuff. But
that's
but
really interesting.
Palestine and Philistine mean the same thing, I believe. Um, so yeah. All right. I okay. We need to do more preparation for this, I guess, because I can't just search through and pick out all of the important like verses at this point, unfortunately.
No, I just wanna read through until we get to like
Cause
Abraham to Isaac.
read through what? Because like we're just gonna sit here and read everything.
No, so I just wanted to read where God promises Isaac to Abraham, and then um, kind of
Ye-
go through a little bit of that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know exactly where that is.
I think you just had it. It was like 3 chapters ago. God's covenant with Abraham. I think it's in here somewhere.
Okay, if you want to read, just read then.
All right. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield. Your I, there's something on the stream. I can't see it. Your exceedingly great reward." But
Yeah.
Abram said, "Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus?" I don't even know who that is. Then Abram said, "Look, you have given me no offspring. One born in my house is my indeed one born in my house is my heir." I don't know what he means by that. No
What do
offspring.
you,
Indeed, one born in my house is my heir.
so his house are a group of people that are more than just his wife, and but they're not his descendants because he hasn't had any children. So it's just his servants. So one of his servants had a child named Eleazar, who is now his right hand man. And if Abram were to die, Eleazar would take over all of his inheritance
Oh, I see. Okay.
because Abram doesn't have any children.
Okay. All right. And scroll down for me. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir." Then he brought him outside and said, Look now toward the heaven and count the stars as if you are able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. That's crazy. All right. And he believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness, which is that's a huge key phrase, because like I know that this is how Abraham got saved, and this is how you got saved pre-Christ, is right? Is and he
That's how you've
believed in the Lord.
always been
Sorry.
saved. Even
Oh,
now,
good point.
it's not any different now. My belief and what I see the Bible teaching is that every human being that will end up in heaven will end up there because of the blood that was spilled by Jesus Christ and the sacrifice that he made for the remission of our sins. Every single person. What people in the Old Testament are doing is they are having faith in and hoping in the ultimate coming of Jesus Christ. They've been promised that from all the way back in Adam and Eve, where it's promised that there's going to be a man who crushes the serpent, right? Um, so we see that all the way back there. There's a promise of human beings being saved, and so we can continue to look for that promise even here.
All right. Then he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it? So he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Then he brought all these to him and cut them in two, down the middle and placed each piece opposite to the other. But he did not cut the birds in two. When the vultures came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, whoa, that's interesting. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years, and also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Scroll down for me. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a to your fathers in peace. That's interesting. It's like saying we're gonna go see our family when we die. You shall be buried in a at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here. So it's like 100 years is the generation, I guess. But in the
Mm-hmm.
fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. I don't know what that means, but that was really interesting. So Abraham gets this interaction with God, and then he goes to sleep, and darkness and horror fall upon him, and he's like, "Yo, your descendants are gonna be slaves in a foreign land," and it's like that. What's going on here? Is God just kind of giving Abraham a prophecy, or is this like a curse? Like, what's kind of going on here?
Well, it's certainly not a curse. Absolutely not. In any way, shape, or form is this a curse. No, no, no. This is a huge blessing. So this is a huge blessing on Abram. Um, so God's just blessing him for
When he's
uh
saying that, know certainly that your descendants scroll up really quick. Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years, and also a nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. Like, why is he telling Abraham that your descendants are going to be strangers in a foreign land?
because this is because he's that's how his descendants will know that that's what's going on. Does that make sense? Like, this is prophecy that's being given to Abram so
Oh, so it
that
is prophecy. Okay.
his children will know what to look for. And so they'll know that they're part of this plan because of the fulfilled prophecy that they see.
My video cut out. All right.
No, my okay, yeah, we need to figure out something other than Discord. So I yeah,
What happened?
I it's everything's a mess, but that's fine. Okay, we'll keep going.
All right. Let's see. The iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Do you know who the Amorites are or what that means?
They're a group of people in Canaan.
Oh, okay. And basically saying like they're gonna have a bunch of sinful actions and they're not done doing those things yet.
Uh, Basically, what happens in the 400 years where Abram leaves and goes into Egypt and out of that family turns and in that time the family turns into not Abram, Israel goes into Egypt, and in that time the family turns from a nation and goes from a nation from a family into a nation. What what is happening over in Canaan is uh, basically Satan is setting up what will all of the traps that he has laid for the Israelites once they come back into the land. And so I think that's what is being said here that uh I
That's okay.
I don't know.
All right. So where was that? All right. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark that behold there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. That's interesting.
Mhm.
On the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadamites, and the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Whoo! All right. Let's move on to the next chapter. Let's see where we're at. Yeah. All right, sweet. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, see now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her. And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife. After Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, so he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. All right, go up a little bit for me. Then Sarai said to Abram, my wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace. When she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judged between you and me. So is she kind of understanding that they did something bad here?
Yeah.
Interesting. And two, um, I thought it was interesting that it said Abram heeded the voice of his wife Sarai. Um, it's kind of the also the predicament of the garden, right? So
Mhm.
it's it's supposed to be kind of like this. I don't know. God gives instructions to the husband. The husband's supposed to carry out those instructions, but then we ended up, he heeds the wife of his wife. That is alternate instructions from the Lord, and then bad things happen. Um,
Exactly.
so Abram said to Sarai, indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please. And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence. Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from the presence. Sorry, go up a little bit. I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. Do you happen to know what Ishmael means?
It's something to do with affliction, but no, not specifically. No.
All right. He shall be a wild man. He his hand shall be against every man. Dang, he's gonna be like fighting, punching people, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. That's interesting. That's like speaking to something there. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees." For she said, have I also here seen him who sees me? Therefore the well was called Bir Lahairoi. Observe it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son whom Hagar bore Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar born Ishmael to Abram. All right, we're getting close to Isaac here. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants after you. Also I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and your me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and after sorry and every and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. He who is born in your house and who is bought with your money must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. So you can't like once you're in it, you're not out of it. Like if you, is that kind of what he's saying right there?
Mm-hmm.
And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Then God said to Abraham, As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed. Go up a little bit. Then Abram fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. I wonder what he's saying right there. Um, then God said, No, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year. Then he finished talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. So Abraham took Ishmael his son, all who were born in his house, and all who were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins. That very same day, as God had said to him, Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very same day Abraham was circumcised, uh, and his son Ishmael, and all the men of his house born in the house or bought with money from a foreigner were circumcised with him. That's interesting. So that means Ishmael is also a part of the Abrahamic covenant. I
Kind
didn't pick
of.
up on that.
Kind of.
Why kind of?
I mean, so they're not part of the Abrahamic covenant in that they don't have any of the blessing. Yeah, Ishmael was circumcised, but that doesn't make him a
He just got a
Jew.
he just got a different blessing. He begot 12 princes and was like a father of many nations and stuff. But the that's interesting because but my covenant will be with Isaac. But then
Yeah,
why circumcise
because it was his whole house. He also
Ishmael?
circumcised servants and all sorts
Oh,
of people that aren't
it was
Jews.
his job to fulfill his duty.
That's what
I
God
see.
commanded him to do was his whole house.
Okay. Right. So let's just quickly recap. We've read a ton of scripture. So Abraham, let's talk about, Abraham, let me try to recap in my mind. So Abraham was living in Ur. He was a resident of Ur, which is kind of like
Hmm.
would be like a modern day Iran or Iraq. He gets God tells him, it's kind of vague how he tells him, I want you to leave your country, leave your father's house, and go to the land that you will inherit. Is he gonna is that I'm promising to you, right? And so goes and does that, and so he's out there in the wilderness with his wife and the maidservants and stuff like that. And then you've got I think you know so they want a son. They're trying to get promised, or God is promising them a son,
Hmm.
and it hasn't happened yet. So Sarah is suggesting that we need an heir because right now it's gonna be, who is it, Eleazar
Yes.
of
So Eleazar was the a child that was born into Abram's house, and so then he grew up in Abram's house and eventually became Abram's right hand man.
Okay, yeah, so Eleazar, and then so basically they wanted their own, their own actual heir, his own son to be the one who inherits things. So, because it wasn't happening yet, so God promises the baby. I don't know if this is happening in sequence, like the way I'm gonna put it, but God promises Abraham and Sarah to have a baby in their old age. Sarah laughs, or Abraham falls on his face and laughs, and God says, is it anything too hard for the Lord? And so um, then it's not happening, and so Sarah suggests to Abraham, hey, take the Hagar, our maidservant, and go into her and have a baby. And basically, so that happens, right? And so then Ishmael is born. There's some time in between, and then finally on the appointed day that God said would actually happen, Abraham has Isaac, and he is 100 years old. So yeah, that's as much as I can remember about Isaac. Did I forget, or sorry, about Abraham? Did I forget anything? Was
Not anything terribly important. You know, he came from the land of Ur of the Chaldeans, went to Canaan, uh, did a bunch of stuff in Canaan. God told him a bunch of things that he was going to do. Abraham believed most of it. Had a little bit of an issue when Sarah was complaining about not having an heir, and then, like you said, uh, Sarah gave Abram her handmaiden to go and have a child with to be an heir for her. That obviously didn't work out the way God wanted it to. And so ultimately, what God did is he provided Abram with an actual, real male heir of his own through Sarah. And so what we see is that's Isaac. And then Isaac has a child as well. His child is named Jacob. And so these are the three patriarchs of Israel: Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or what you'll sometimes see it called as Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. So Jacob, depending on the connotation that the person is trying to have on him, will mention either his given name of Jacob or his God given name of Israel. And so it's so at one point in Jacob's life, he's wrestling with an angel or with God potentially, And what ultimately happens is that being, I believe it's God, blesses him and changes his name from Jacob to Israel, which now just stands for the whole nation as an entirety. Because in Israel, there is all of the tribes of Israel, right? And so, yeah. If that, what are the
Really quick,
tribes there?
I heard this thing on a sermon that was basically, I can't remember. It was might have been Ray Bentley from Maranatha. He's and so he basically was somebody. It might have been him, but he was saying that when God or this angel touched Jacob on the hip, that it like dislocated his hip, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, like Jews don't eat meat that's like around the hip of like a lamb or something, which is super interesting, right? Like I didn't like that. That's just in their tradition and stuff like that.
Yes.
That was
So
passed down.
that's exactly the case, and there is a Bible verse that speaks about that.
Oh wow. Like
Mm-hmm.
is it somewhere in like Deuteronomy or something like that?
So the Bible verse where the hip gets dislocated is in Genesis, and I believe
Okay.
in that blurb it says, "And that's why we don't eat that part of the animal today." I believe that's what
Oh,
it says.
oh,
So it's got
interesting.
a
Okay.
in the book of Genesis. There's a little aside that says, "And that's why we don't eat this today." I
Oh, okay.
believe, if memory serves me, but yeah. So, there Abraham, Isaac. So Isaac, his son. I don't believe there's a whole lot about his story, but where we really start. Oh, sorry. So Isaac has
He's
two
gonna come
children.
through with the has to do with his wife, like the whole interaction between Isaac and his wife, right? There's like a
So
little bit of a story there.
so between Isaac and his wife, what it is Isaac has two sons named Jacob and Esau, and they were twins. And so Jacob and Esau, ba- so Esau so Jacob comes out, his ankle comes out first, and they tie a red, they tie something around his ankle. I believe it's a red uh, little piece of cloth, and but then his foot goes back in, and ultimately, Esau comes out first and is the firstborn. So he's the firstborn by his mother, and then the secondborn is Jacob, but he had that red thing on his foot, so he kind of came out first. So it's an interesting story, but
Whoa.
basically, Esau gets all the blessings as the firstborn, or is supposed to get all the blessings as the firstborn. And so the story of Jacob and Esau is how Esau ultimately doesn't value that status and that blessing that he's supposed to have, and he gives it away in one instance. He gives away his birthright to Jacob
For some
and
soup?
for some soup. And then in another instance, you see Jacob and his mother conniving and contriving to lie to his father and steal the blessing that is supposed to go to Esau and to have that blessing instead go to Jacob. And so we see in that story a lot of interesting things that are going on. Obviously, that's not what God wanted for them to happen. God didn't want the blessing to be stolen that way, but Jacob and his mother took that into their own hands and sinned in order to make that happen. Okay?
It was totally his mom's idea.
Mm-hmm.
It was like her suggestion to him. Like,
Yes.
hey, we're gonna go make this meal and you're gonna dress up as like your brother. It was just so crazy. But
Yep.
like it's interesting that she's just starts or the Bible just records her already rolling into these suggestions and it doesn't give context as to why the mom wants the younger child to have the birthright.
Well,
But
if we
maybe there's
so
something go yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So I would guess that what is happening there is a pretty typical mother son family dynamic. One of the sons goes out and is a hunter and is away from home all the time and is just out in the woods being a crazy, you know, very early on man, like a man in Canaan, and what was this, like 2000 BC. So he's just out roughing it in the woods and just loving his life, hunting out there away from mom. Whereas Jacob's back at home, being more of a domestic person, and so he's back at home hanging out with mom all day, being a little mama's boy. And so that's where I'm guessing that relationship took root. Esau's out away from mom, doesn't care what mom has to say. Jacob's back at home helping mom out with all the stuff at home where she can love on him and develop that relationship. That would be my guess, just based on the information that we have. And so again, that's just a guess. We aren't told that in scripture, and I certainly don't have any special revelation on the relationship between Jacob and his mother. But we can kind of see those sorts of relationships and those sorts of things happen in our own families, even today, where mothers will prefer, one child that's kind of more at home more often, and the other child that goes out and does, whatever else isn't around as much, and that doesn't build up the same relationship. And so it's interesting what we see in these scenarios where God actually allows the birthright and the blessing to go to someone who isn't the firstborn. And what we see in a number of different places is the firstborn or the first choice gets passed over for the actual real person that God had in mind for that blessing. So that's what happened in this story. That wasn't the way God wanted it to happen necessarily, or the way God would have had it done if in a sinless way. But sinfully, they tricked their father, and Jacob ended up getting the blessing. So then he actually has to run away from home. So he goes and he runs away from home. His mom sets him up and says, "Go back this direction," and he escapes his brother's wrath. He thinks that his brother's going to kill him, which is possible after stealing the blessing like he did. And so he escapes. He goes and he finds a man. I can't remember the man's name. Do you remember the man's name by any chance that he escapes to? It's not Nathan. It's
Oh, I wouldn't know this.
yeah.
This is an
So
obscure one.
so he goes and he works for a man who has two daughters named Leah and Rachel. And so Rachel is the one that he agreed. So Jacob sets up a deal with this man, and as part of the deal, Jacob will work for 7 years for this man, and after 7 years, he will gain the right to marry his daughter. Specifically, he says Rachel. What ends up happening is, as part of after the 7 years of work is completed, he ends up going through a marriage ceremony, but they covered the daughter's face with the veil, and after the ceremony had already been completed and after everything had been consummated, Jacob finds out that instead of marrying Rachel, the one that he had worked for, she's the younger daughter, the older daughter Leah had to be married off first, because apparently there is a custom among their people that you can't marry off the younger daughter till the older daughter is married. So what ends up happening is he then renegotiates the deal and decides to give this man another 7 years of his labor in order to get his real wife that he really wanted, Rachel. And so these two women become the matriarchs of Israel, along with their handmaids, in a very similar story to what happened with Abraham and Sarah. And yeah, so that's kind of the story of what goes on there. Ultimately, Jacob becomes Israel. They're the same person, and he has 12 children who end up being called the tribes of Israel.
What do you mean Jacob is Israel, that they're the same person?
Yeah, so Jacob's name got changed to Israel. So as we saw earlier, where Abram got his name changed to Abraham, and where Sarai got her name changed to Sarah, we see that God changes people's names at his discretion when different major events happen in their lives. In this instance, Jacob ends up wrestling with an angel
Oh, that's
or
when
with
that
God.
happened? Was
Yes.
when they were wrestling? Oh,
So
cool.
that
Okay.
the name change was part of the blessing at the end. And
Okay.
so and what you'll see throughout the
Because you have
Bible,
wrestled with God and won, or
mhm,
something like that. Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty close. You have wrestled with God, and he didn't die.
Yeah.
He put up a good fight, but yeah, so he ends up getting his name changed, but what's interesting about Jacob is we'll see him referred to as Jacob and Israel interchangeably. Whereas after Abraham gets his name changed, I don't believe it ever goes back to using to using Abram in the Bible again. So that's an interesting little thing.
What is it called when Christ appears in the Old Testament?
Theophany.
What do you think Jacob wrestling with that angel was a theophany?
I believe so. I believe that
Okay.
was a pre New Testament incarnation of Jesus Christ. We also see him show up in the burning oven in the furnace where
Oh, and Daniel.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are put in the oven in Daniel. I believe that is my belief. So there's other people that don't believe that that's a theophany. That's up to your interpretation. So
Okay, all right. And so, Jacob or Israel has um, those those 12 sons. Let me, if I could just here. Did you end up already saying the 12 tribes
no,
there?
I haven't said the 12 tribes. We have gone over those tribes in the past. I mentioned a couple of the really important ones that you'll see crop up. The kings all come out of a tribe called Judah. The priests all come out of a tribe called Levi. There's other
Oh,
tribes that have uh, different things about them, and so yeah, they're all really important, of course. There's also a belief in some modern Christian denominations or systems of belief that says that there are 10 lost tribes of Israel. That is not the case. There are 12 tribes of Israel today. There's always been 12 tribes of Israel, and the modern descendants of Jews can know which tribes that they are a part of or which tribes are there historically that they've been that they came from. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of people that believe that there's lost tribes, and that is just a factual inaccuracy, and that is incorrect. So,
yeah. They're probably trying to say something like there is a family that we don't recognize as a connection to this other family. And like that's probably kind of what they mean by like a lost tribe. Like like that the Indian island people. That's kind of what they're probably. It's kind of like a lost tribe thing, but it's probably like they're relatives of these people. You know what I mean? So it's probably something like that. Like I don't know. The way they're
um,
talking about lost tribes is probably just distant relatives of people we know. You know.
so just to get into a little bit, since you're asking the question, the reason that they say that there's lost tribes is at a certain point Israel split into two. So at a certain
Oh,
way later on in the story, so we're talking after the Pentateuch, once we're into the kingdom area of Israel or kingdom era of Israel, what we see is that the I just lost where I was going with this. I'm sorry. So we were talking about the 12 lost tribes. So after King Solomon dies, the nation is split into two. Rehoboam is the king over one, Jeroboam is the king over the other, and in that time they believe that 10 of the tribes were lost, and that's just not the case. The faithful that were in all 10 tribes went to the south where they were able to worship God, and then the unfaithful went north where they didn't worship God. And so that's kind of the story there of the lost tribes. But again, that's a whole separate story from what we're going over right now.
okay.
With
Two
yeah.
quick things.
So
So
did you have the list of the tribes to read real quick?
yeah. So that list is gonna be the tribe of Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. These
Mm-hmm.
are the sons of Jacob. And I was gonna ask you a really quick question. So for next week, we're gonna do we're gonna start on the story of Joseph because after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you've got the 12 sons of Jacob, and then I wanted to hone in on Joseph because that's the last thing right before Exodus, and Exodus is going to be cool because that's where we get the 10 Commandments and all that good
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Let my people go. But also, I wanted to basically, you said all the kings came from Judah and all the priests came from Levi. Does Jesus have anything to do with he does, but what does the tribe of Levi and Judah have to do with Jesus? Do either of them have to do with Jesus? Because Jesus is a priest and he's also a
Mm-hmm.
king, so
Yep.
it's like is there any information there like relating
Yeah.
to the tribe of Levi and Judah or in Jesus?
So Jesus is described as being out of the root of Jesse, and his family comes from the tribe of Judah. Okay. So Jesus is of the tribe of Judah. He is not a Levite in any way, shape, or form, to my knowledge. and he has no special role from any lineage of the tribe of Levi. And so Jesus Christ can claim to be king over Israel because of his lineage through Judah, but he
Oh,
can claim to be a priest, and he is our high priest in the lineage of Melchizedek, as Hebrews explains to us, as the book of Hebrews explains to us.
really interesting. So, did you go as far as saying that David was also in the line of Melchizedek?
Yeah. So David is not in the line of Melchizedek. David's in the line of Judah. He's part of the yeah.
I'm not understanding something. How do Melchizedek, the line of Melchizedek, meet Jesus, and the line of David meet Jesus, but Melchizedek and David don't meet each
So
other?
we're talking about genealogies versus religious practices. So
Oh, okay.
genealogically, Jesus is in the line of David. David is not genealogically in the same line as Melchizedek. Melchizedek being a Gentile, he is outside of the Judaic inheritance, but Jesus Christ is described as being a high priest in the line of Melchizedek. And the other thing we don't know about Melchizedek is he doesn't have a genealogy, so he didn't get his high priest status from any genealogy that we know of in the Bible.
Oh,
And
oh, it was like through the worship of God,
it was
or
God,
like,
however he attained it, God gave it to him. God told him he was just worshiping God. However he attained that, we don't know. That's between Melchizedek and God. But when Abraham offered to Melchizedek the spoils of war, or the tithe, that's when he showed that Melchizedek really is of God Most High, and he is someone that Jesus could then be in the line of, that would supersede the line of the Levites. So Jesus' high priesthood supersedes the line of the Levitical high priesthood, because through Abraham, because the Levites were still in their father Abraham, they gave tithe to Melchizedek. It's a whole mathematical formula, essentially, that Hebrews goes through, the book of Hebrews. So if you're interested in that, you can go check that out in that book. It's a tongue twister for sure, trying to trying to say that, not alone, let alone just think about how that all works out. So
yeah.
uh
Um, so did you have anything really quick?
yeah, when we get into it, the story of Joseph, that's the last, I believe, about 10 chapters of Genesis before we get into Exodus. That's a really cool story. I would highly recommend going and reading that if you're not someone who reads the Bible regularly. It's just a good story, and it's a lot of fun to read, and will show you a lot about how kind of God works, and kind of the way that he set it up for Joseph to be saved despite the plotting and the everything that went on around him. So I would just highly recommend that you read that for next week. We'll try to go through and cover that story then, I believe, right?
Yeah, yeah, because Joseph is long enough that you said 10 chapters, so we can definitely I don't think it'd be 2 hours. I'm thinking if we put 10 minutes to each chapter and kind of like explained everything that was going on, it'd be like an hour and 20, maybe even less. So I think we could also pick up maybe the beginning of Exodus too, and kind of just talk about some stuff there, but we can go over that, you know.
Yeah,
um,
we'll see what ends up happening next week. We're not making any promises here.
yeah.
It's possible we just skip it all entirely. We'll see where we're at. He might have some other great questions for us, but
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what we're
yeah.
looking at.
Definitely, definitely.
Um,
Uh,
But yeah, anything else? Any other questions about this? Kind of, we're wrapping up the first part of Genesis and the first part of the Bible.
Oh no, no, everything has been covered pretty good. It was interesting learning about pre-flood stuff, and then Noah and post-flood things, and then we get all the way to um, Abraham, and then the stuff that's going on. Abraham is the start of the Jewish nation, and you got the covenant that's being started right there. So there's a lot. Genesis is definitely a jam-packed book. I think. if you've never read it, you owe it to yourself to read it. It's a great read, and yeah, I like what we've discussed so far, and we're gonna wrap up with Joseph. I think that's gonna cover it pretty good, and
Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah,
and then
and you know, I just want to reiterate that I think that both Austin and I take the book of Genesis very seriously, and in many places very literally. You know, I believe that these people really existed. I believe that these events really happened, and that they're not just some, you know, fairy tale or mythology that we tell our children so that they obey us and don't, you know, don't do
I'd believe it
bad
over a
things.
college history textbook for sure. That
Well, and you look at those textbooks and they change every 10 years, every 20 years. It's different history because we've learned new things. What's never happened is no one's ever contradicted the Bible and had that ultimately turn out to be the truth. And
no, we're
so
actually proving these things to be true. It's quite the opposite. It's pretty nuts.
exactly, exactly. So do you have any more questions for me?
No, I think that's gonna do it. So, where can we find all your stuff, Ryan?
Yeah, so if you want to see some more of the stuff that I'm putting out personally, you can check that out over at As It Is Written on basically everything. You can go to aiiw.org to find all of my stuff. And how about you, Austin? Where can we find your stuff outside of this?
Basically social wise, it's just gonna be faithful dialogues. That's pretty much it. And then, any as far as the Apostles Attic, that is the gospel centered Christ clothing line. Um, I encourage everybody to go check it out, and we're gonna do a shirt giveaway at 50 YouTube followers. So yeah, still really excited about that. Or subscribers, sorry, 50 YouTube subscribers, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that's gonna go down.
That's exciting. And I've had a wonderful time talking with you today, Austin. Thanks for
You
taking your
too, yeah.
Saturday morning to have this dialogue. And I'm excited for next week. So we will see you then.
All right.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.